Berlin, 1935. Heinrich Himmler didn't just want to conquer Europe, he wanted to prove Germany inherited it from the gods. Deep in SS headquarters, an entire research division worked not on weapons or strategy, but on mythology. Their mission: find physical proof that the German people descended from Atlantis. This wasn't academic curiosity, this was existential. Because if they could prove their bloodline traced back to a lost super-civilization, every conquest became restoration. Every atrocity became destiny. How does the most technologically advanced nation in Europe become obsessed with ancient myth? The answer lies in the wreckage of World War I. Germany lost everything in 1918. The Treaty of Versailles carved up the nation and demanded impossible reparations. Millions starved. Inflation destroyed life savings overnight. The German people needed an explanation for their humiliation that didn't involve accepting permanent defeat. Into this despair stepped the occultists. The Thule Society formed in Munich in 1918, named after the mythical northern homeland described in ancient texts. Its members weren't just mystics, they were lawyers, professors, industrialists, educated men searching for meaning in the ruins of their country. They found it in a dangerous idea that the German people descended from Atlantis itself. The theory was elegant in its simplicity. Thousands of years ago, an advanced civilization existed on a now drowned continent. Its people were tall, blonde, blue-eyed supermen who mastered technology and spiritual power beyond anything seen since. Then came catastrophe. Atlantis sank beneath the waves, but some Atlanteans survived. These refugees fled across the world, to Egypt, where they built the pyramids, to Tibet, where they established hidden kingdoms, to Northern Europe, where they became the ancestors of the Germanic peoples. The evidence seemed everywhere. The swastika appeared in India, Tibet, even among Native Americans. Flood myths existed in nearly every culture. Megalithic structures too advanced for their supposed builders dotted every continent. This wasn't fringe theory for long. The Thule Society became the scaffolding for the Nazi Party. Its members included Dietrich Eckart, Hitler's mentor, and Rudolf Hess, future Deputy Führer. By the time Hitler seized power in 1933, Atlantis wasn't mythology, it was doctrine. Heinrich Himmler believed every word of it. As head of the SS, Himmler commanded 250,000 men. He would eventually orchestrate the Holocaust. But his deepest obsession was proving that the Atlantis myth was historical fact. In July 1935, he created an entire research organization to do exactly that. He called it the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Society. The mission was deceptively simple: study the Germanic peoples. But everyone understood the real purpose: find physical evidence that the Aryan race descended from Atlantis, make Nazi conquest look like historical inevitability. Himmler poured millions of Reichsmarks into the effort, recruiting archaeologists, anthropologists, and occultists who would produce evidence supporting the theory or lose everything. The expeditions were already being planned: Tibet, Iceland, the North Sea Islands, anywhere Atlantean refugees might have left traces. But before they could find Atlantis beneath the waves, they had to understand what it really was and what forbidden powers it possessed. To the Nazis, Atlantis wasn't just a lost city, it was the cradle of the master race, a technological and spiritual empire that mastered forces modern science refuses to acknowledge. And they believed they could resurrect it. The framework came from occult philosophers who'd spent decades weaving mythology into pseudoscience. Guido von List and Jörg Lanz von Liebenfels created what they called Ariosophy, blending Norse paganism with racial mysticism and Atlantean legend. Their conclusion was radical. Atlantis hadn't been in the Atlantic Ocean at all. It was a northern civilization, a polar paradise that existed before Earth's axis shifted. They called it by different names: Hyperborea, Thule, the Aryan homeland. But the story remained consistent. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Arctic wasn't frozen wasteland. It was temperate, fertile, the birthplace of a race of giants who wielded power we've since forgotten. Then catastrophe struck. An Austrian engineer named Hans Herbiger provided the Nazis with their scientific justification. His world ice theory claimed that moons made of ice periodically crashed into Earth, triggering cataclysmic floods. One such collision destroyed the northern paradise, tilting the planet and sending Atlantis beneath rising seas. But here's what made this mythology so dangerous. The Nazis believed some Atlanteans had preserved more than just knowledge. They'd preserved their bloodline. Nazi occultists became obsessed with Vril, a psychic life force described in Edward Bulwer Lytton's 1871 novel The Coming Race. To the Thule Society and later the Ahnenerbe, this wasn't fiction, it was suppressed history. Atlanteans had commanded Vril energy that could heal, destroy, or transform matter through will alone. The pure Aryan bloodline could reawaken it. This is where real geography entered their mythology. The island of Heligoland became sacred ground. Heligoland rises from the North Sea like a wound, its red sandstone cliffs dramatic against grey waters. To Nazi occultists, this wasn't just a strategic outpost. They viewed it as a surviving fragment of the lost northern world, a piece of the prehistoric landscape connecting them directly to Hyperborea and Atlantis. Its red cliffs weren't geology. They were the blood of the ancient land, still visible above the waves that swallowed everything else. The symbolism was perfect. If most of the Aryan homeland drowned, Heligoland proved some fragments endured. It represented continuity, a bridge between the drowned world and modern Germany. The Atlantean refugees, according to Nazi theory, had fled in all directions. Some went to Egypt, becoming the god kings who built the pyramids. Some reached Tibet, establishing hidden kingdoms where they preserved racial purity. Some sailed to South America, becoming the white gods of Incan legend. And some stayed closer to home, settling in northern Europe as Germanic tribes. Every advanced ancient civilization was reframed as Atlantean inheritance. The swastika appeared globally because Atlantean refugees carried it as a sacred symbol. Flood myths echoed across cultures because everyone remembered the same catastrophe. But the Nazis weren't searching for ruins, they were searching for something far more dangerous. They believed that if they could find living descendants of Atlantis, people whose bloodline remained pure, they could unlock genetic memory, the knowledge, the power, the Vril energy that once made Atlanteans gods could be reawakened in Aryan blood. This wasn't archaeology, it was resurrection. If these forbidden connections between Nazi occultism and ancient mythology are opening your eyes to how dangerous weaponized history becomes, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the expeditions they launched to prove these theories led to places and discoveries that make the mythology look tame by comparison. Between 1935 and 1945, the Ahnenerbe launched dozens of expeditions across the globe. Officially, they studied archaeology and anthropology. In reality, they hunted ghosts of a drowned civilization, and every journey followed the same tragic pattern: depart with certainty, find evidence contradicting their theories, ignore the contradictions, return claiming symbolic victory. The expeditions began close to home, in the North Sea itself. Himmler authorized submarine surveys and geological studies around Heligoland and the Doggerland region, the vast submerged land bridge that once connected Britain to continental Europe. The Doggerland theory was tantalizing because it was partially true. Real Stone Age settlements had existed there before rising seas flooded the North Sea around 6500 BC. But the Nazis weren't searching for Stone Age hunters. They were searching for Atlantean cities, advanced harbors, evidence of the polar civilization that ruled before the flood. They found nothing but drowned river valleys and mammoth bones. Technology limitations prevented deeper exploration, but Himmler ordered the research continued. The North Sea, he insisted, held secrets that would validate everything. In 1938, attention turned to Iceland. A team of Ahnenerbe researchers sailed north to study ancient Icelandic sagas and runic inscriptions. The theory was elegant. Iceland represented a stepping stone between the drowned Atlantean homeland and Scandinavia. Surely the sagas preserved memories of the catastrophe. What they found were medieval Norse settlements, Viking poetry. nothing older than the 9th century AD. The researchers dismissed these findings as degenerate remnants, corrupted versions of older truths now lost. They returned claiming symbolic success while producing zero evidence of pre-flood civilization. But the crown jewel of Nazi Atlantis hunting was Tibet. In April 1938, Ernst Schäfer led 5 SS officers on the most ambitious pseudo-scientific expedition in history. The Himalayas represented the ultimate Atlantean refuge. When the northern paradise drowned, survivors would have fled to the highest ground on Earth. There, isolated by the most formidable mountains, they could have preserved their bloodline for millennia. Tibetan Buddhism's use of the swastika seemed to prove the connection. The expedition's true purpose was embodied in Bruno Beger, a 26-year-old racial anthropologist. While Schäfer collected bird specimens, Beger measured skulls with calipers. He photographed faces from multiple angles. He recorded eye color against standardized charts. He was searching for Nordic ancestry in short, dark-skinned, black-haired people. He found none. Every measurement contradicted the Atlantis theory. The team reached Lhasa in January 1939, the first Germans ever officially invited to Tibet's holy city. They filmed monasteries, documented ceremonies, and befriended the regent. Schäfer had scored a massive propaganda victory, humiliating the British who'd been trying to access Tibet for decades, but scientifically, the mission was hollow. Beger's measurements were incomplete and contradictory. The swastikas they photographed proved only that an ancient symbol appeared in multiple cultures independently. By August 1939, urgent messages from Berlin demanded their return. Europe was moving toward war. They raced back through India, landing in Munich on August 4th. Heinrich Himmler personally greeted them at the airport as heroes. 27 days later, Germany invaded Poland. The Ahnenerbe had found no evidence of Atlantis, but Himmler didn't care about actual findings. The expeditions themselves were the victory. The real reckoning would come later, when Bruno Beger's training in measuring skulls led him to the gates of Auschwitz. And the fantasy of finding Atlantean descendants transformed into the nightmare of eliminating everyone else. The Nazis didn't just want to prove Atlantis existed, they wanted to rebuild it, and that meant recovering the lost sciences that made the Atlanteans gods among men. Because if bloodline was half the equation, knowledge was the other half, ancient power waiting to be reawakened. The obsession centered on forces that modern physics supposedly couldn't explain or refused to acknowledge. Vril energy became the holy grail of Nazi occult research. Based on Bulwer Lytton's 1871 novel about underground survivors wielding psychic power, the concept evolved into something far more dangerous. The Vril Society claimed this energy was real, Atlantean in origin, a life force that could be weaponized. Nazi scientists attempted to harness Vril through electromagnetic experiments, acoustic resonance weapons, and psychic research programs. The logic was twisted but consistent. If Aryan blood carried Atlantean genetics, then certain frequencies, certain rituals might activate dormant abilities. They were trying to reverse engineer godhood. The most infamous alleged project was Die Glocke, the bell. Rumored to be an anti-gravity device based on Atlantean physics, it supposedly used counter-rotating cylinders filled with mercury-like substances, generating fields that warped space itself. Whether the bell actually existed remains debated, but the fact that resources were diverted to such projects during wartime shows how seriously Himmler took the occult agenda. Runes became more than symbols. Karl Maria Willigut, Himmler's personal mystic advisor, claimed each rune was a vibrational code. Not alphabet, but technology. He insisted that ancient Aryans understood sound as a creative force that specific frequencies could affect matter, consciousness, even DNA itself. Castle Wewelsburg became Himmler's cathedral to this vision. The triangular fortress in Westphalia was redesigned as an SS temple, incorporating sacred geometry supposedly inherited from Atlantean architectural principles. The North Tower featured a circular room with 12 pedestals, a ritual space where SS generals would meditate, attempting to access ancestral memory encoded in their blood. The ceremonies combined Nordic paganism with occult Atlantology. SS officers underwent initiations involving runic meditation, past life regression attempts, and rituals designed to awaken vril sensitivity. Himmler genuinely believed these practices could give Germany supernatural advantages. But perhaps most disturbing was the Lebensborn program's deeper agenda, breeding pure Aryan children to awaken dormant Atlantean traits. The program wasn't just about population numbers, it was about creating a master race capable of wielding powers their ancestors once commanded. Ancient texts became military targets. The Ahnenerbe hunted for pre-flood manuscripts in Tibetan monasteries. They obsessed over the Linde book, a supposed chronicle of Atlantean survivors. They believed the Vatican vaults hid texts proving Christianity had stolen from older Aryan religion, and that the Church had deliberately suppressed Atlantean sciences to keep humanity weak. The ultimate goal wasn't just historical validation. Himmler genuinely believed that if they could recover Atlantean sciences, the mathematics, the frequencies, the energy manipulation techniques, that Germany would become unstoppable, not through superior tanks, but through mastery of forces modern physics hadn't discovered. To the Nazi occultists, World War II wasn't just a political conflict. It was a race against time to recover Atlantean knowledge before their enemies did. Whoever unlocked the secrets first would inherit the power that once ruled the ancient world. But like Atlantis itself, the obsession would collapse under its own weight. And when the fantasy finally met reality, the world would discover how many millions had died because mythology mattered more than humanity. May 1945, Berlin in ruins. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12. Himmler bit down on a cyanide capsule. Hitler shot himself in a bunker, and the Ahnenerbe's archives burned. But the obsession didn't die with them. The expeditions had found nothing. Every measurement contradicted their theories. Tibetans showed no Nordic ancestry. Heligoland revealed no pre-flood civilization. The runes were medieval Norse, not Atlantean codes. Vril energy never manifested. No ancient manuscripts containing forbidden sciences were recovered. The swastikas in Tibet meant nothing except that humans independently create similar symbols. The scientific verdict was unambiguous. Atlantis, as the Nazis imagined it, never existed. But the belief system had already done its damage. The mythology justified territorial expansion as reclaiming ancient Aryan lands. It framed race laws as preserving Atlantean purity. It transformed conquest into restoration. And most horrifically, it made genocide seem like biological necessity, eliminating corruption from the master race's bloodline. Bruno Beger embodied the direct line from fantasy to atrocity. The man who measured Tibetan skulls searching for Atlantean refugees became the man who selected prisoners at Auschwitz. In February 1943, Himmler sent him there with a specific task: create a skeleton collection for a museum of inferior races. Beger measured 109 Jewish prisoners while they were still alive, made detailed facial molds, took photographs. Then they were sent to the gas chambers, murdered specifically so their skeletons could be preserved for Nazi pseudoscience. The victims were finally given proper burial after Allied liberation. Beger was tried in 1971, convicted as an accessory to murder, and received a 3-year suspended sentence. He never expressed remorse. He lived to 98, dying in 2009. Ernst Schaefer survived the war, but his career died with the Nazi regime. Cleared of major crimes, no legitimate institution would employ him. He fled to Venezuela and created a wildlife park, still insisting until his death in 1992 that he'd been a pure scientist. Heinrich Himmler never abandoned his belief. Even as Germany collapsed, he clung to his racial theories. He escaped trial by suicide in May 1945. The Ahnenerbe was dissolved with Nazi Germany's defeat. Its members faced Nuremberg trials. Some were executed, others received prison sentences. Many escaped justice entirely. But here's what haunts us. The Atlantis myth didn't disappear. It went underground, preserved by neo-Nazi groups and esoteric societies. Worse, fragments of Nazi Atlantology infected modern conspiracy culture. Ancient astronaut theories often recycle Nazi ideas about advanced prehistoric civilizations. The notion of lost Aryan superscience persists in fringe movements worldwide. Modern scholarship has since proven what the evidence always showed. Doggerland was real, but held Stone Age settlements, not advanced civilization. Genetic studies confirm all human populations are mixed. No pure bloodlines exist. The swastika appeared independently across cultures. Plato's Atlantis was allegory, likely based on Minoan Crete's volcanic destruction around 1600 BC. The Nazis searched the world for a civilization that never existed. But in doing so, they revealed something far more terrifying: how easily mythology transforms into murder when belief overrides evidence. When a nation's insecurity becomes a supremacist fantasy, when the need to believe becomes more powerful than the need for truth. They never found Atlantis, but millions died because they believed in it. The Nazis searched the world for proof of a civilization that never existed. But in doing so, they revealed something far more real: how easily human beings transform longing into legend, legend into ideology, and ideology into atrocity. What did the Atlantis myth really represent? A psychological need to believe in a golden age, especially after national trauma. The fantasy that greatness is inherited, not earned. The comfort of biological destiny over moral responsibility. A story that made conquest feel like restoration and genocide feel like purification. Why Atlantis specifically? Because it's the perfect myth for dangerous movements. It's geographically vague enough to be found anywhere, chronologically distant enough to be impossible to disprove, morally flexible, you can project any values onto it, and eternally aspirational, always just out of reach, always demanding one more expedition, one more sacrifice to reclaim it. The structure is what matters. Every totalitarian mythology follows the same pattern. Identify a lost golden age when your people were pure. Blame enemies for stealing that greatness. Frame present suffering as temporary deviation. Promise restoration through elimination. Make violence seem like healing. Atlantis gave the Nazis all of this. It explained German humiliation without accepting defeat. It provided ancient precedent for racial hierarchy. It justified expansion as homecoming. It made extermination camps seem like surgery, cutting out infection to restore health. We mock the Nazi occultists for chasing ghosts. But how many modern movements are built on the same foundation? Mythic pasts, chosen peoples, lost golden ages waiting to be restored through violence, secret knowledge suppressed by elites. The symbols change, the structure remains. The Nazis weren't uniquely susceptible to mythology. They were human, and humans, when traumatized and desperate, will believe almost anything that promises to restore meaning and power. The danger isn't in studying ancient mysteries. The danger is in needing to believe so badly that evidence becomes irrelevant. When mythology drives policy, horror follows. When belief overrides reality, genocide becomes thinkable. When a nation's insecurity transforms into supremacist fantasy, the distance from library to death camp becomes terrifyingly short. The Nazis didn't find Atlantis in Heligoland or Tibet. They found it in themselves, in their willingness to believe a beautiful lie rather than face an uncomfortable truth. They searched for a drowned continent, never realizing they were the ones drowning in their own mythology. By the time they understood, it was too late. For them, and for millions of others. Atlantis never existed, but it also never goes away, because it isn't really about a lost continent. It's about the human need to believe we were once greater, purer, chosen. And that need, left unchecked and weaponized, turns scholars into murderers and nations into nightmares. The real lesson isn't about what the Nazis believed. It's about what happens when any of us stop questioning our beliefs, when we let ideology corrupt evidence, when we allow mythology to matter more than humanity. The patterns that destroyed nations in the 1940s are still here, dressed in new symbols, waiting for the next generation willing to believe. Understanding how it happened might be the only way to stop it from happening again. If this journey has opened your eyes to how weaponized mythology destroys civilizations, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the forbidden histories we uncover aren't just about the past. They're warnings about patterns that never die, only transform and wait for their next opportunity.